Hello, me again. Okay, so you just did this sheet and your partners are in groups, and it's probably hard, right? It's hard to define what is a disorder, right? What is abnormal. And because it's so hard, it's changed throughout the years a lot. So you've got your definitions up on the board. So hopefully what we'll do now is I'm going to show you kind of what the definition is and what they've come up with, and then we can kind of see who had the best definition. And then afterwards, based on the criteria I tell you, then we can kind of go back over these and see if you were right on these. Okay? Cool. One thing I do like to kind of start and preface this whole unit with is that it's a serious topic. I think it's one of the reasons that people sometimes take AP Psychology is they're so interested in disorders, which is great. And it is very fascinating, right? But at the same time, it is a serious topic, and there are times where we'll look at some people that are a little bit funny, and you can admit that. But there's other times where it's serious, and in every class I've ever taught, right, there's somebody struggling with something, and maybe there's a spectrum, right, of how much they're struggling, but we get into things a little bit more common, like anxiety and depression, and who knows, a lot of people have had schizophrenia in their family, so we'll talk about that too. So I just want you to keep that in mind, that it is a serious topic, even though it's very interesting. Okay, cool. So kind of what we'll look at in this chapter in general is what criteria we're going to use, how to define it, what causes it. That's one thing you're kind of look on your own as well for that. And then how does it manifest itself, and what are the symptoms of different disorders. Okay? Alright, so you had your 4 scenarios, so we'll go back over that. Alright, here you go. Ready? Okay. So a psychological disorder, they have come up with that they are persistently harmful thoughts, feelings, and actions. So a key part of that is persistent, right? One thing, when we go over some of these, people have the idea that they have this, I think they call it the psychology student disorder, where they hear all this and they're like, oh my gosh, I do have that. But if it's not persistent, right? And it must have the 3 Ds, okay? It's not a good place. There we go. The 3 Ds. Alright, it's important. It needs to be deviant, distressful, and dysfunctional. I'm going to go into more detail on all these. Okay? So deviant, distressful, and dysfunctional. Side note, should be taking notes for this, right? I'm sorry, I was thinking tomorrow we're going to start with anxiety disorders. You have Ms. Thompson's going to give you a worksheet. Okay? Okay, so here we go. Deviant. What does it mean to be deviant? Kind of has a negative connotation. But deviant is when you deviate from the norm, right? So here's the normal, here's most people, and then you deviate. And a lot of times that can be good in life, right? But here, when you're talking about disorders, not so much. So this says behavior in one culture may be considered normal, while in others it may lead to arrest. Okay, so this is an important part here. Culture and time period and all that stuff. In your culture, if you are with the norm, right? If you don't deviate, then that's not a disorder, right? It has to be you are different from the norm here. So for example, if you compare this picture here, if somebody did that here in our culture, we would consider that deviant, right? However, in her culture, that's not deviant, right? So that's one thing I want you to take notice of. Okay, deviant, but it has to be deviant from their own culture. Alright, distressful. Just what distressful means, it causes pain and suffering. Okay, and a lot of these do cause pain and suffering to the individual, but another part of that, it can causes pain and suffering to other people, to like family members nearby. All right? And then dysfunctional. So this is a key part too. Dysfunctional means it interferes with your ability to have a normal life. You can't function normally because of that. All right? And that can be depression and anxiety, schizophrenia. Any of those would classify as impairing your inability to have a normal life. Okay? Sorry, I'll go back to that. All right, now let's look at your 4. Where is it? Sorry, your 4 scenarios, and let's decide now based on those 3 things: deviant, distressful, dysfunctional. Which one of these have disorders? Okay, number 1, a man walks up to a window carrying a chair. He puts down the chair, opens the window, takes off his clothes, and seats himself on the chair. Why? He says he feels the need for an air bath. So what do you guys think? Yes or no? Well, you don't know the backstory here. The backstory is this is actually Benjamin Franklin, and hygiene was not easy back then, right? And showers. So a lot of times people would go take an air bath. So this is not a disorder. And the reason is because in his culture, in his time period, it's not deviant. Okay, now, would it cause me distress to see that? Yeah, probably. In our time period, what about in our culture and time period? Potentially, yeah, that could be disorder. Okay, number 2. Every morning, a woman who lives in a Boston suburb asks her husband to bring in the morning newspaper, which the carrier throws just inside their fence. She's terribly afraid of encountering a poisonous snake, even though her husband says there's not any. She's afraid to leave the house. Okay, so deviant. Is this different than most people? Yes. Okay, distressful. Uh-oh, I got a visitor.
Can I watch you?
Come here. Can I say hi real quick?
Yeah.
Say hi.
Hi.
Is this bedtime for you?
At bedtime for me.
Can you say goodnight?
Good night.
Blow a kiss. Okay, I'll take it. Alright, go back to Daddy. Good night, okay? Go. Okay. Distressful. Causes harm or stress to her or other people. Yeah, it especially, her husband too would cause distress. And especially if she's like nervous all the time because of that, then that's distressful. Alright, dysfunctional. Is she able to lead a normal life? No, she's not. Okay? So that is a disorder. Anybody know what that is? That's a phobia. Okay, 2 more. Teenage boy packs a blanket, a bottle of water. He ignores near freezing temperatures, climbs a mountain, and blah, blah, blah. And he says he's seen a vision. Backstory, you don't know it here. This is part of a Native American ritual in order to become a man. So, culture, is that deviant? No. Now, in our day today, if somebody did that, that could be a disorder, right? Especially visions, that could be definitely something. All right, last, a teenage girl misses school for 3 days, breaks into tears, can't get out of bed, cannot sleep for more than an hour or 2, has no appetite, and becomes nauseated. What do you think? Guess what? There's a backstory here. Now, if you look at that, it sounds like depression, right? 3 days. In my head, I'm like, is that long enough? Is that persistent enough? So that makes me want to say no. But here's also the backstory. That both of her parents died in a car crash 3 days earlier. So would you consider this deviant then? The answer is no. Distressful, dysfunctional, yes, but not deviant. Now, could this turn into something like depression? Yes, right? But we're not there yet. Based on time. Okay? Alright, how'd you do? Probably not as well as you could because you didn't have the backstory. Cool. Okay, next one. What happened here? What is going on? There we go. Anybody? Yeah, I heard you. Okay. Obviously there's a hole in his head. How to get there? It's like there's 20 questions. So, we are going to start with how did they used to treat disorders and how far they've come and that kind of thing. So that is called trepanation, where they basically drill a hole in their head, and they believe that that would release the spirits. Here you go. Here's a picture of it happening. And if you see, you've got a clergy member here. So there's that religious motivation. I guess this is your doctor. I don't know what this is. Yeah, I don't know. But trepanation was that idea of if we could drill in there, then we can release the evil spirits. Do we feel that today? No. Okay, exorcism. You've heard of that before. That was an ancient treatment of disorders. Imagine, like, because there have been disorders throughout human history, right? And so what did they used to do a long time ago and believe about these people because they didn't have medicine and scientific research? Okay, they would cage them up like animals a lot of times, beat them, burn them, castrate them, mutilate them, give animal blood transfusion. Maybe if you get animal blood in there, that would help. Yeah, so be glad you don't live back then. So it's going to progress a little bit, all right? Philippe Pinel from France, now we're in kind of the 1800s here, said that, okay guys, these mental illnesses are not due to demonic possession. They don't have demons in them, but it's something that's an ailment of the mind, right? There's something in there, and there's a picture there still has got a pretty negative perception of disorders, right? Dance in the madhouse. But his legacy was remove the chains, take these people out of cages, and replace it with gentleness. Maybe that's how we can fix the ailment of the mind. Okay? And so even kind of then and after that, there's this idea of the medical model. Okay? And basically, it meant that psychological disorders, these diseases have physical causes. There's something physical in there that can cause these disorders. And how do you treat that? All right? You diagnose it, you treat it, and you can cure it in most cases. So it's very physical, right? Very physical. So what do you think? Do we believe this today? Your answer is no, because you're in this class and you've learned that if we talk about somebody's behavior, what other ways, we don't just say it's just a physical, but there's all these other perspectives and things going into disorders, right? So this is called the biopsychosocial perspective, is how we look at disorders today. Okay? And basically, I mean, just like we've talked about in the past, that if you think about depression, we go with depression, okay? There's going to be biological reasons. We're going to talk about brain chemistry and, do you remember the neurotransmitter, serotonin? Okay? There's going to be psychological influences, which means like how they think, right? Obviously. Learned helplessness, for example, we talk about that. And then social cultural is, if you think about depression today, there's a ton of things that have added to like suicide rates. Think about social media and bullying and online and all that junk, right? Or just the media in general and expectations. So that's what we do today. We say there's multiple things that all influence these disorders. Okay? Okay. Now, if you think something's going on with you, or your parents think something's going on with you, and they want you to get looked at, what happens? Right? You've heard of psychologists and psychiatrists, and you go see somebody. You go in, what happens? Lay down on the couch like Freud? Okay. Okay, so there is a manual today that they use. Alright, so it's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And they call that the DSM for short. If you look at over here on the right, it's changed over the years. In 2013, not that long ago, they came out with the 5th edition. It's in all your bookstores today. Actually, I have no clue if it's in a bookstore. You can get it on Amazon. I should look how much that is. It's expensive, I bet. Okay, so this is like the manual that psychiatrists will look at. Alright, and what they do is you'd sit down, you'd talk, and they'd probably have a list of questions that they go through, and every psychiatrist kind of has a different way of diagnosing. But in this, basically, there are 400 disorders. Compared to in the 1950s, there were only 60. What does that mean? Does that mean that we're researching more? Does it mean that we are overdiagnosing? You can argue what you want. But, okay, this is important. The DSM, the goal of it is it describes disorders. So, description of symptoms, behaviors, that kind of thing. Alright? It tells you how prevalent, how common the disorder is. What it does not do, okay, this is important. The book does not diagnose you. And it does not treat you. Right? It classifies disorders, and it's up to the psychiatrist to diagnose, basically, and then determine treatment. So that's important kind of distinction there. Now, what are the criticisms out there? So this picture right here, sorry about that. Okay. Their jackets say asylum. Alright, so we use different words than that today, right? Treatment centers, inpatient, that kind of stuff. Asylum, even that word has a pretty negative connotation. And so people see this picture and they're like, look at those crazy people, right? Fun fact, these are actually prison guards, but kind of plays on the fact that there's a stigma when a person's labeled that you have a disorder, right? And also, that you also get into the idea of insanity. And so a lot of murder trials have a huge pressure on them of, should we label this person insane? And then they don't get the death penalty, or they don't go to normal prison. So there's a lot of ethical questions with this as well. Okay? So in general, that's your intro for this chapter, and we're going to look at different types of disorders, and then every day, basically, I'm going to give you a lecture, and then you're going to watch videos on it. And so I want you to get some real life video on this. Okay? I'm bummed that I'm not there because I feel like it's an important chapter to be there for, but that's okay. All right. I'll see you tomorrow, whenever. Okay, bye.